So what changed with the Genius Act? Let's outline that for everyone because that's a big deal. The legislation that's getting pushed right now in the States is really shaping the future of this industry, and it's why everyone should be paying attention because the fact that this stuff has even gotten to this point when there was no security, no rules in place, tells you that it can explode very quickly if things go the way that I think they can, because there's rules, right? And so do you mind explaining that?
Yeah. So just like any other sort of money market kind of company, like you usually have to report to the people that are investing in your offering that you're holding the assets that you're saying you're holding. And so in this case, we have Tether, which is essentially like you can think of them as a bank in a way. Any stablecoin provider in the United States now has to actually fully disclose what is backing their assets and the actual process for what that's going to look like. I actually don't know 100%, but I know that in the Stablecoin Act, they have said, hey, you have to back your assets one to one with short term US treasuries or cash equivalents, right? And so that goes also into our thing that you were just saying, Ben, about how, well, what does this mean for the United States and why is this so beneficial to the US? And there it goes. So now we have these digital assets that can be purchased by anyone, anywhere in the world that now must be backed if they're issued in the United States. They must be backed one to one by US dollars. And so this basically sets the standard, or excuse me, backed one to one by US treasuries, by short term US treasuries. And so this essentially sets a global standard for what all stablecoins that are representing dollars must do. They all must buy short term US treasuries in order to be allowed to operate in the US.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a massive deal for a bunch of reasons that we can dive a little bit deeper into. So, there's a reason why when you have a $20 bill, you can go basically anywhere in the world with an American 20 or $100 bill, and people will take it for the value that it's worth, like at its home country. That's not a thing with like any other currency. It's just not. And so, if you can essentially give that to people in a way where they don't need the physical bill, that's a huge win for America to maintain this stranglehold over fiat currency that they've had for a very long time, which is huge. And also, if in the global trade scene, America's really been able to do a lot of the things that they've done over the years because there was such a massive demand for their dollars. And so that's started to go down, as Keith's mentioned in previous episodes, as people are less and less confident that America can maintain what it's done and pay back its debts. And so, with that, this basically creates a massive amount of demand for the US dollar, which can help alleviate some of the problems that the States has with their crazy amount of debt and that decreased demand. It was kind of like worse to a bad to a worse situation that this can come in and kind of act as like a bit of a save the day kind of thing. So that's a big thing to understand.
Yeah. Thanks for breaking that down a little bit because that's the big thing here is on a global stage, US treasuries and US dollar is kind of phasing out of demand. You have like the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa that are saying, yo, we're not really cool with you guys having the dominant currency and like bullying us with that. So we're going to find ways to move around this. And Russia has been probably the most vocal about this. And they have also even very specifically come out and said, well, the BRICS nations have come together to come out and say, we're going to use a cryptocurrency like instrument to circumvent the US dollar. So that, by the way, has been on record since like 2017 or something. I think they first started saying that. And so it's kind of, we're moving into a world where countries are looking to find a way to get off the US dollar. And to go back to Currency Wars by Jim Rickards, 2012, this was already a discussion. This is what that book is about, is that what would these governments do to be able to wean off of the United States dollar? And what would that look like? What impact would that have on financial markets? What impact would that have on geopolitics? And what would we do as a reaction to that? In that book, the main scenario that they go over is having a gold backed currency as the way to circumvent the US dollar. And if we've been paying any attention, not only to the price of gold, that actually came after we've had over the past few years, these governments all around the world absolutely hoarding gold, really, really going hard on buying as much gold as possible. And so with that, we've definitely started to move into the place where if that is what these countries want to do, move to a gold standard, there's a good chance that they would probably be in position to do that right about now. And the price of gold is obviously
It's
soaring to
crazy.
all-time highs, as we said.
Yeah, gold's been going mental. We've mentioned that a few times throughout different episodes, but for the understanding for people who are here, of course, they know America is the big scary country, big military, etc. But there's underlying things that were set deliberately to maintain that status of large demand. One of the things that I believe is the fact that oil was pegged in dollars, right? So to buy oil on the global scene, you needed US dollars to conduct that. Is that correct?
Correct, correct. The petrodollar was a big thing that came into effect after we depegged from gold.
Got it. And so then that's what the last time period has been. And so now it's probably going to lead to some radical change in terms of what this is back to now. But a lot of countries are saying that the crypto is going to be essentially the thing that allows America to maintain that status. And you actually made a video very recently on this that did very, very well, where wasn't it the Russian, somebody from Russia, right? Who they said that, and then he was freaking out too. He's like, America is about to use crypto to wipe out all of their debt. Can you explain a little bit more of the specifics of what they're alleging and stuff?
Yeah, so we don't know exactly how, right? But the Russian finance minister or something like that, he came out and said that the US is trying to wipe out its debt using cryptocurrency. And so, or gold. And so with that, I kind of just did a little bit of a video kind of outlining some scenarios of what that could potentially look like. And one of the things that has been clear is that, let me say this, Judy Shelton was a former economic advisor to the current president of the United States. And during that time, 2016 to 2020 era, she actually uh, was appointed to become the chairman of the Fed. And before then, and ever since then as well, she's written, I believe, at least one book, maybe multiple books, about the need for the world to go back to a gold standard. And in this, she's also had an interview where she came out and said that this was like 2016 or something crazy. She was like, I see the world moving towards a gold standard in a new cryptocurrency kind of way. And these are the exact words that kind of came out of her mouth now,
Wow.
not verbatim, but basically. And so I just think that a big part of this is definitely going to involve some sort of digital currency. Now, whether it's like the digital currencies that you and I are used to, whether they are these permissionless networks that anyone can kind of use, I don't think it necessarily has to look like that. But I also go over different types of solutions that exist where you might be able to actually issue currencies on a particular blockchain that are essentially being represented, where you have other assets that are also being represented on that chain. Just gonna go ahead and say it for my people in the back. The XRP ledger,
I knew that
right?
was
Being a
coming. Yeah.
place where you can actually issue whatever asset you want and tokenize whatever asset you want. And when you go there, then now you can have one other currency that exists on this chain that's backed by these other assets that are issued on that chain. Now you can do this on any different, on many different types um, of blockchains, but the XRP ledger is designed for that. So, anyways, I'll step back for a second. I forgot how we got off the rails.
No, no, you're good. So do you think we should dive any deeper into Tether? Is there anything else that you wanted to add, or should we open it up to stable coins in general?
I think we can. The last thing that I wanted to say on Tether was that we did have right after the stablecoin, the Genius Act was passed. Tether announced the USAT stablecoin for America.
Yes, yes, yes. Can you explain what that is, the differences between the two?
So, so I'm just going to read what I'm seeing here. Tether is launching a new U.S. regulated dollar-backed stablecoin called USAT to serve the American market, which is distinct from its existing global USDT coin. The new coin is designed for U.S. residents and institutions, will be subject to U.S. regulations like the Genius Act, and aims to provide greater transparency and institutional access. Oh, and by the way, wow, I'm tripping. This is going to be led by Bo Hines, who was formerly the director of the cryptocurrency task force in the United
Mhm.
States. So I didn't even notice that, but that's a big part of this too.
That's
So,
massive.
anyways,
Okay. Yeah, no, is that the last piece on Tether?
yeah, and it's just funny because it's like when I saw that, I was like, so Tether's not following these rules.
Right now, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, we can move on.
Totally. Yeah, no, the largest stable coin on the planet is not following these rules. That's a little bit, concerning, I'd say at the very least. And so then if we wanna open it up to stable coins at large more now, what's stopping the major banks from coming in and issuing their own stable coins and just doing this whole thing behind their brand name? Like, why couldn't that be a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely moving into a world where we will see more stable coins. I think another thing that's funny about the banks is like we really wouldn't have to know as much if they were using stable coins. Like I think there's a way that like stablecoins could be being used without anyone ever knowing that inside of the banking system. And they would just have more efficient cross-border payments and like, as the end user, oh, I got my money faster, kind of like
Yeah, yeah,
Zelle.
yeah.
Like no one has to know how Zelle
It's
works.
done.
It just it's there. Okay, cool. But yeah, no, I mean, we are seeing banks start to say out loud that, oh, we're going to start launching our stablecoin, this and that. Now, I think we brought up in one of the past episodes of like whether or not these stablecoins will actually be white labeled or not, because I do think that that would be a more like realistic path rather than setting up the infrastructure to create a stablecoin, which it's not that big of a deal. They are already banks, so they probably have most of that together.
Yeah,
But I do think when it comes to the tech, probably better off to not do that
to white
and
label it,
have the BitGos and the Coinbase custodies of the world kind of be responsible
deal
for
with it.
that.
Yeah, and Tom Lee has been the voice behind pushing the narrative that Ethereum is the stablecoin blockchain, and so he's really pushing to make that happen because if you get tied to someone's bank, there's definitely a strong degree of trust there, and also a ton of money. And so Zeos2G had a good post here. Yeah, you already got it. Awesome. The government could mint itself out of debt? Question mark. That's a really good question. And it kind of does sound like that, but how I see it and how I understand what Keith's saying is it wouldn't be minting their way out of debt. It'd more so be repegging how the whole game is played to basically change how their current situation actually is in terms of how the new system is run.
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be like a little bit of a reworking of the financial system, and it kind of goes into the next question that RD has asked. We can also talk about Ryan too, if you want to touch on that.
We'll come back to Caspa at the
Okay.
end. Let's keep it relevant to here. So RD's question is: can you explain the difference between stablecoins and CBDCs? This is big.
Yeah. So CBDCs are essentially going to be the idea of a CBDC is that it is a direct liability of the central bank of whatever country it is that we're talking about. So, with that, what it means is that when you are essentially going to use money in your country, right? The physical currency that we have today is a direct liability of the Fed. Now, the thing about a CBDC is that you would basically be taking these dollars and tokenizing them and making them digital. And with that, you might not really have the need for the physical dollar as much. That's one thing to think about. But the second thing is that now you have a digital version of that. Right? The way that the system works today, to be clear, right, is you have an intermediation. So the central bank, yes, they create money, but they give that money to the banks. The banks then give that money to the people. But with the CBDC, you have a potential for that actually going direct to the consumer. So in 2020, in the United States, we had Maxine Waters publish a bill right in the middle of this crisis. This was wild. It just came out and went away. She published this idea of there being Fed accounts. It was crazy, by the way. Like this was just randomly in this, like, thousands and thousands of pages of legislation during the COVID times, 2020 times. And there was just this Fed accounts and digital dollars in there. And people were like, wait, what? Like, where did this come from? This isn't a thing. But
Hmm.
anyways, I don't think that legislation got passed. But the idea being that you would have an account that you could set up with the Federal Reserve itself, and that would be where you get access to dollars. And essentially being able to use that as your banking service rather than the actual commercial banks. Now, there are ways to have a CBDC that is intermediated, right? And this is what the solutions like Stellar Lumens and like Ripple XRP are trying to create is to have some intermediation between where that actually takes place so that the banks actually are responsible for managing the CBDCs and then they take that and then they issue their own currencies based upon the CBDCs that are private money like these stablecoins.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the major difference. The CBDC is a direct liability of the Fed. The stablecoin is a direct liability of a private company.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, that makes sense to me. If you need any further clarification, Artie, please just let us know. But I do think that stablecoins are going to become a far bigger thing in the very near future for all the things that we've mentioned. And I also think that Trump's been talking about how he would give what was the terminology that the money that he gave to people during COVID. What were those called again?
I'm sorry, say that again.
When Trump just gave people money during
The
COVID.
stimulus checks.
Yeah, stimulus checks. And so I would not be shocked at all if he gives some sort of small amount of stimulus through the vehicle of a stable coin to basically usher in adoption of that, right? There's a lot of people who won't go learn something, but if they know that there's a guaranteed $500 on the other end of it, suddenly they'll learn it, right? It happens all the time. It's actually the same marketing move that Charles Hoskinson's using with Midnight. It's the exact same thing. I would not be shocked at all if in the near future, especially when it's coming for important milestones for Trump's continuation of getting more power and everything, I do think that he'll probably announce some free money in the form of a stablecoin. I would not be shocked to see that happen.
Yeah. And then so the major concern for the CBDC, by the way, is like if the Fed has complete control over the money system in a digital format, then we could potentially move into a world where our transactions are all traced for one, and then also potentially controllable. Like the same concerns that we have with Teller around like, oh, they can just freeze and seize assets whenever they want. Well, if you gave that directly to the government, well, they could do a whole lot more than just seize and freeze. They could put time limits on the money. They could encourage certain types of spending and discourage other types of spending. And quite frankly, like the technology that I'm seeing built out is kind of designed to create that kind of a world.
Exact situation.
um, so imagine having a world where the money supply and interest rates are set algorithmically by economic activity, right? So if we're seeing that people are not spending money and we want to encourage spending because they're afraid of the economy or whatever, then we'll put a time limit on all of their money. So they have to spend it. And if they have to spend it, then now we get more money flowing into the economy. And so the velocity of money, right, goes back up. So velocity of money, interest rates, and all of that could be and prices even, right? And taxes even could be algorithmically set and implemented in real time. And just imagine a world like that.
Yeah, that's definitely where people go to where they get the most afraid because the technology is there. But there's also the argument where, again, I don't believe in almost anything governments say that is in the best interest of their people, even when they say that it is. But if the people were there building the rules actually did understand everything, much like Charles said in the talk that we talked about, like there is the technology to do it right. It's just trusting that they will, and you can't go back if they don't. Like that's the scariest part in all of this. This is why it's so important for people to get really educated so they actually know what's being discussed in these bills that are getting passed and the legislation that's coming into place because so many people they just see it and they're like, oh, it's crypto bill. Like it's really important that you understand what all of these terms mean so that when they try to throw stuff in there, you actually know what they're saying. Do you want to show some of these comments and address of it?
Yeah. So would US then only use CBDC to peg to dollar to pay down debt? RD, I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
Yeah, I don't fully. I think what they're saying is that would they just print the money to solve their problem in terms of like just creating that money and then paying the debt? If they did that, I think that would cause too much of a that would defeat the purpose.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't work. But I think they're going to use some creative changing of systems and instruments to basically repeg
Yes.
what their debt's worth. Go ahead.
So this is the part where I think it gets fun because the only way for the US to be able to create uh, a way to pay down its debt is for there to be, in my eyes, this is how I look at it. There has to be some volatile asset. It can't be a stable coin or a CBDC. There needs to be something that's volatile that creates the ability to actually create the wealth or the money that they need to then pay off the debt,
Mm.
however they want to rebalance the debt or whatever. And so this is where once again we go back to like, oh, okay, we need a volatile asset. People are asked all the time, like, well, what makes XRP any different than a stablecoin? What makes it any better than a stablecoin? Why wouldn't you just use a stablecoin? Because XRP is not solving that problem. The problem that it's solving is a political problem. It is this debt issue that it's trying to solve. And so, anyways, that stuff I save a little bit more for my close friends. But at the end of the day, you need some sort of a volatile asset, like a even if it was just Bitcoin. Like you need Bitcoin. The government has kind of said that we're going to acquire and potentially hold Bitcoin. So in that case, right, if Bitcoin goes up to some crazy amount of money and that's on their balance sheet, now they have a much lower debt to asset ratio. So anyway,
Keith, are we not your close friends?
you guys are my like acquaintances. Now I'm just kidding.
Because we should be getting all the best stuff here. So I'm just saying.
I pretty much just took it all the way. I think the only thing that I hold back is my level of conviction on what it is that's actually happening. And that's
Got it.
just, to
Yeah,
scare
let
away
people totally. I'm totally trolling you, but
the
let people
haters.
come to their own conclusions. But we've got some. Didn't Trump say no CBDC in US? I think he said that publicly, but
And,
saying one thing
and
and go ahead.
And there was when the Genius Act was passed, there was also the Anti CBDC Surveillance Act that also got passed. So, yeah, you're not allowed to create a CBDC, but I don't know how they defined it, and that's what matters: is how do you define CBDC?
And if you know anybody who deals with law, you know how much they can hide in vague language. And so if there's not a strong level of understanding amongst the voting public, people get away with shit all the time, right? That's why it's so important to get educated on the stuff that seems boring. That's why we're trying to make this stuff more fun and trying to provide more characters, stories, drama to make these things more fun because they're going to decide how we live for like the next 100 years. There's a bill looking to ban it. I think that's what Keith just mentioned. Yeah. So it's
And Congress has been a lot more like they know, right? They're like, nah, that act did not do it. Like it didn't do
mm,
what we need them to do. And so I think there's more legislation that's been trying to come out around that as well.
totally. And JDM, I can definitely agree with this sentiment. Never listen to a politician. That's the issue because we also talk about how, and even politicians openly say how there's a shadow government that is really pulling the strings behind the scenes. So even someone who is the purest of heart, if they get in there, they typically change, right? And then we also have the additional issue of financial interests where there is so much, I don't even know the proper term for it, but where politicians basically use their access to information to benefit themselves with their investment decisions far earlier than it reaches the public, like Pelosi, I think it is, right? Where there's somebody made an app where they could just follow her trades, which is crazy. And apparently she's not even in the top 10 in terms of those kinds of performance, which is crazy, right? Like that should be an obvious no brainer. If you work in politics, you should not be able to invest. Like I feel like that's so obvious. The conflict of interest there is off the charts.
Yeah, for sure. And I like the correction that you made to yourself there, JDM, to believe, because you do have to listen to them. Like they might
Great
tell you
call.
exactly what not to do or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like you can get some good signals.
Great point. Yeah, and it does seem like there's some people in there that are trying to make change, but it does seem like the system, even internally for them, is deliberately built in a way where things are very much on a need to know basis. And so it's difficult to have open dialogue when everything needs to be said in a skiff. And there's so much red tape, and even presidents can't be read into certain things that are within the US government. It's just insane. Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
Yeah. And I mean, I think in the US and probably in other democracies and republics as well, it's like I had a conversation with a family member about this recently. It's like the incentives are just they're just not all the way right because
No.
what happens is these people get in there, they get offered stuff, right? Let's be honest. And then their incentive becomes, well, I want to keep getting this stuff that I'm being offered. And if I'm not in the seat, then I'm not going to get offered this stuff. So then it turns into like, how can I create the biggest show to make sure that these people love me? Right.
Mhm.
And it just becomes this whole like I guess like self-reinforcing loop of them like pandering to the people and the people loving them and then them continuing to, just go back and forth with that. And it's not a great look.
Yeah, there's a reason like politics is a show, right? Like they are literally a reality TV show, and that's why some of the figures in there, they're not there for their ethics, their morals, even their thinking ability. They're there for the character that can be pushed for people to get behind with clips and with segments and headlines and social signals, right? Like
It's
all of these
crazy.
people are like and in Canada we have a big issue here too, but much like you said, like the incentives aren't in line. And that's a systemic issue that is so important to change because I wouldn't even want to go into politics because the only way to really do well in a lot of cases is to do it like that. And it seems like it's almost impossible to make change unless you get along with whatever they're deciding to push. So it really does need to it seems like the system needs to be completely rebuilt. And I'm hopeful that blockchain could be more involved in a lot of these things to make things more transparent and inclusive. We've talked about this at length with where there is that technology that's out there where theoretically things could be a lot more open and also give us more say in it because it's kind of crazy how we're trusting people that don't know anything about, let's say, crypto to make decisions for us on crypto. Like that's crazy.
Yep. And that spans across every single
Everything.
thing because these people don't know anything about anything most of the time. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
well, how can they? Most of them are more concerned with the play that they're doing, right? Which is
Mhm.
really is political theater, and so they're more concerned with how do I get more eyeballs? How do I piss off more people who are against me to rally the people who are for me, rather than actually serving the people? In many cases, of course, there are exceptions to this. There's some politicians that I really like. There's this one guy in America who's like very pro UFO disclosure. Who was just on Tucker Carlson. He's hilarious. He's from Tennessee. We need more people who are
Oh,
real
wow.
people in there.
Is
We
it
need
Bill Haggerty?
this guy
I
has
don't know.
glasses. Does Bill have glasses? But we need more people in there. No, it's not Bill. Let me find him. We need more people in there who are actually just real people. And when I watch this shit, I can say like this guy's a real guy, you know. But he's hilarious, and his story on Tucker, I recommend reading that. Tim Burchett
Okay.
is his name,
Gotcha.
and he was recently on Tucker's show, And he just has a real story, and maybe it's perfectly executed by the deep state, but in terms of just reading it, I didn't get that, or watching it, I didn't get that vibe. And he had some good stories there. He's very open and trying to be honest, and it seems like that at least. And he's very public about how discombobulated the entire system really is and how difficult making change happen is.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And back to this whole blockchain idea, the thing that's really wild, and I think maybe Mark Andreessen was talking about this one day, but like we could imagine a world, right, where we have these like AI that actually help to make all of these decisions and that become the politicians of the future.
Yeah,
And the
I know.
blockchain would make that a lot more possible. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to if done well, it could make things so much better, but you're putting so much trust into people who have consistently shown they can't be trusted, right? And that's what creates this entire problem is how do you change the system where that is no longer a thing? I'm gonna go back to my dude here, Charles. Like he talks about the stuff at length on his channel and very like deep interweaving, very boring content. But if you can sit through it, it's crazy to think about the underlying problems because we all headline skim, especially if you're not a deep knowledge matter expert or subject matter expert. Like we all look to signals, right? But there's so many deeper interweaving things that we're not privy to that make the problem a lot more complex than it seems to us on the outside. So there's definitely a lot to think about. Are there any of these comments that you want to chop it up on, Keith?
I think we could talk a little bit about RD's statement. Do you think the current manipulation of crypto markets has anything to do with them clearing the market so the US can create a BTC reserve?
There's a lot of people who feel stuff like that. And I would say undoubtedly the markets have been manipulated. Who's executing it all? Hard to say. You've talked a lot before, Keith, about Max Payne theory. Is that what it's called? And
Yeah,
so
man.
that's playing a role because everyone's so heavy on leverage, man. And so as long as that continues to happen, you're gonna keep getting wiped out. It's too profitable.
Yeah, lots of leverage in the system. It continues to build up even right after these events. It just continues to build back up again. And then on top of that, I think we're starting to get like, I'm seeing a lot of people who are new coming into the game. And you've got some people who are going to start throwing some real money at this stuff coming into the
Totally.
game because the laws are passing. So you got the big dogs, the people that have built up their nest egg and they're coming into the game. And I'm gonna be honest, like I bet you that just took a lot. They were like, I ain't playing this game. I don't like this game.
True.
So
Yeah.
it's gonna be, yeah. So
I do think so many people are gonna enter this space though, because as they create more and more vehicles to enter with less friction and their money guy can
yeah.
sell them products that gives them exposure to this. I just think there's going to be a cascade of things where things are going to move so fast. Go ahead. You got something to say?
Well, because this was the other thing that I was talking to some of my students about is like technically in the ETFs, you wouldn't have seen this level of volatility, primarily because they don't trade 24/7. So the market had closed by the time that was happening.
Very good point.
Yeah, and so but also because there's not leverage built up on those products, so you don't get those same types of liquidation events in the ETF itself. So,
Totally.
yeah, that's when it
Yeah,
happens.
and I will say that too, that there's so many people who are gonna be hearing about this from more and more sources that they trust, and there's also a massive sector of wealth out there from people who have just never touched this space that are going to at least put a percentage of their wealth. Like, I think about my dad all the time who purely trusts his money guy, and whenever I talked to him about crypto over the years, he'd always be like, "That's a scam, that's a scam," because my dad thinks everything's a scam. And so, until his money guy says it's a good idea, he wasn't gonna listen to me saying it was a good idea, but as soon as that guy says, I think you should at least put 5% towards it, he's just going to blindly say yes. And then when that happens and the 5% makes his net worth go up a massive amount, you don't think he's going to brag about that on the dock? And then everybody else is going to go call their money guy to do the exact same thing? Like, I just think it can move very quickly from word of mouth. And then for more of like the retail stuff, social media will be massive for that.
Yeah, and so Coinbase will just be perpetually down during those times, so be prepared for that.
Be very prepared for that. Yeah, it's absolutely. But I think now what I would say, and we can go any which way after this that you want, but now is the point in time where things haven't gone crazy yet, and they very much may. I'm not going to say that they will or they won't. I personally think that they will, but I'm an idiot. For this though, it's the time where go back and look at other cycles and look at how much stuff moved, how big it moved, and how a few $100 or a few $1,000 in the right thing would have completely changed your life. right? Like the power is in the understanding and having the bravery to believe what you research and understand and take a shot.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I always try to preach around, like, I did a video, it was called Is it too late to buy Bitcoin or whatever, something like that. And the major thing here is like there's an asymmetric opportunity where if this becomes, right, like the thing, and like this is the future of money, then for you to literally sit there and just say, "Oh, I don't like it. I'm not going to participate."
Crazy.
That could be
So, so
generationally
bro,
impoverishing your entire, posterity.
man, I try to tell my friends about this stuff, and everyone always thinks that everyone else is just full of shit, which I get to a degree. And some natural skepticism is a good idea. But I'm literally like good friends with these people, and I know this shit better than 99% of the world. And I'm like, guys, pay attention. And they're all just like, right? And then as soon as it's over, they're gonna be like texting me all this crap. Like, if you take stuff seriously, you're here, so you guys are already taking this stuff seriously. And just for someone like, let's say you have a gambling addiction. Okay, if you want to make your gambling addiction like a higher chance of winning, take what you were gambling, do some research, and put it into stocks or crypto, where we actually have a better chance of winning. Especially with crypto, or with where we are. None of this is financial advice. I will never give financial advice, but I'd be willing to bet that you could get a lot higher chances of winning at far higher multiples if you were to do research, make your own decisions, and put that into crypto rather than gambling. And a lot of people are spending money they don't even think about. They might even put, like, let's say 100 or like $500 a month if you're comfortable into gambling, which you're going to burn that money. You're lighting it on fire. Where the best case scenario, you're turning that 500 into, let's say, like 4 or 5K tops. With crypto, if you were to hit big on something that you put $500 in, that could change your entire life. Like, that's actually what's at stake here. If you take the time to figure this stuff out and don't just headline skim or go on Twitter and go into a meme coin called like tits and ass, and like do some research and actually find some stuff. You know what I mean? Like, people will go put their money in something dumb because they've seen something like fart coin go crazy, which we're going to actually, that's teasing a future episode. We're going to talk about why meme coins are such a big deal, the psychology of meme coins, and also the growth apparatus that is there from the mechanism of alignment. And so we'll talk about all that, but like, lock in, people, is what I'm trying to say. And a very long way of saying that.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, let's say you're right. Let's say that this is all a big scam. It's like,
I call that natural selection. I love that so much.
yeah, I mean, it's a crazy time because it's like it's tough, dude. Because I also don't completely convince myself that like this has to be the way, right? But that's also what I preach is like you don't have to be like 100%. This is the truth. What's going to happen? It's like, well, we don't really necessarily know. Maybe this is a big rug pull that's happening in real time, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to have exposure to the asset class. You know what I mean?
Yes. And what are the alternatives, right? Even if it is a rug pull, much like you said, I think you coined it perfectly. It's an asymmetric bet where basically, if it goes your way, you're winning so exponentially. So think about this: if you're a sports gambler, crypto with the research behind it is like a massive 12-leg parlay, but you actually have a chance of hitting it. It's not like a really good one, but it's way more statistically likely than the bets that you're putting out like a DGen every weekend. Like, that, I'm very confident if you go do the time, you will find that. And you don't need to be right more than once if you're
Right.
playing in something this high leverage, right? Like, some of my biggest wins that changed my entire life was because I was right on like one or two things. I think people don't get in this because, like, oh, I might be burning some money. It's like, dude, you burn money on fast food, you burn money on all this horrible stuff. This is something that actually has an asymmetric opportunity for you to make way more if you hit. Obviously, most people won't, but if you do,
Yeah. And we see JDM put out a cool little bit of information that he had from his life.
yeah, gambling is the biggest scam. Gambling is actually one of the biggest epidemics on the planet right now. The next one of the future apps that I'm going to build is try to provide a mechanism for people to try to reduce their gambling or stop gambling altogether. Because that
Nice.
is, we've been trying to do that for a while. We're just trying to find someone to partner with who can understand the psychology of it. Because I could make some BS app that doesn't really work and still make a ton of money, but I want to make it work. So we're just trying to
Yeah.
find the partner who understands the psychology of it and what you can swap, like in terms of a software functionality. So that's something that's there. So total shot in the dark. But if you guys know any sort of someone who's a specialist in the psychology of gambling, please get in contact with me. We have an app we want to build, and we have a loose direction for it, but we want to know the efficacy behind what we're making.
Then coming through with the apps. That's a big one. That would be massive.
Yes, that'd be huge. Yeah, and also because it's direct. And for a little business lesson here is that if you want to make money You got to make it obvious for people that it will either make them money or save them money. If you do that, the sale becomes a no brainer.